Have you ever looked at your child and wondered if every sacrifice was worth it? I did. Until one Tuesday evening, when I realized I had not just built a life, I had funded a monster and a parasite. This is not a story for your pity. This is a receipt for every dollar, every drop of sweat, and all of my stupidity. And this is my collection day. My name is Eleanor Vance. I am 58 years old, and I am, or perhaps I was, a retired financial analyst. That Tuesday night began like any other in my Back Bay home. The city hummed quietly below my window, a familiar comfort. I was scrolling through the community news feed for my neighborhood, a digital corkboard of trivialities for Boston's upper crust. The glass of Cabernet in my hand was perfectly chilled. I skimmed past the usual grievances. Mrs. Abernathy was complaining about a poorly parked Bentley. Mr. Davies had lost his Bengal cat again, the third time this month. It was all background noise, the dull static of lives insulated by wealth and privilege, lives like the one I had built. Then, a post stopped my thumb. The image was grainy, clearly taken from a distance by a concerned or perhaps disgusted neighbour. It was blurry, indistinct at first, just another piece of urban grit. But the caption read, "Vagrancy on Newbury Street getting worse. Has anyone seen this man before? It is a disgrace." My breath caught. I tapped the image, enlarging it until the pixels screamed. A man was sitting slumped on the cold paving stones, his back against the polished granite facade of a luxury boutique. He was wearing what had once been an expensive suit, now torn at the elbow and stained down the lapel. His shoes were gone. Beside him, propped against a filthy backpack, was a piece of cardboard. The lettering was crude, written in black marker. Harvard grad. Need work. Please help. The wineglass slipped from my hand. It did not shatter, but landed heavily on the thick Persian rug, spilling a dark red stain that looked like blood. I did not care. I was frozen. My eyes locked on the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears, loud as a drum. I zoomed in again, pushing the phone's resolution past its limit, focusing on the man's face, the grime, the matted hair, the unkempt beard that was patchy and thin. But the eyes, even through the digital distortion, I knew those eyes, sunken, hollow, and utterly defeated. It was Arthur, my son. A wave of nausea and disbelief so potent it made the room spin washed over me. This was impossible. This was a mistake, a cruel joke. It was not Arthur. It could not be. My Arthur, my brilliant boy who had wanted for nothing, who had been given everything. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Was it a prank, some bizarre piece of performance art? The desperation etched onto that face was not performance. It was real. The confusion was a physical weight, crushing my chest. Arthur could not be homeless. He could not be begging. I had just transferred his monthly allowance, $15,000. I wired it to the trust account, the same as I did on the first of every month. Just last week. $15,000. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely operate my phone. I stabbed at the screen, pulling up my recent contacts. Arthur. I called him. The line clicked. Word, and then a sterile, automated voice. The number you have dialed has been disconnected. Disconnected panic. Cold and sharp. Pierced through the fog of disbelief. I hung up, my thumbs swiping frantically. Serafina. I would call Serafina. His wife. She would explain this. She would laugh and tell me Arthur had lost his phone during some expensive weekend getaway. I pressed call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Each ring echoed in the silent apartment, tightening the knot in my stomach. Finally, it clicked over to voicemail. Her voice filled the room, impossibly cheerful, dripping with a practiced, sugary sweetness. "Hi, we cannot take your call right now." A tinkling little laugh. "We are probably somewhere amazing. Leave a message, and we will get back to you." Maybe beep. Somewhere amazing. I looked back at the image on my screen, the grainy photograph of my son, huddled on the pavement, the cardboard sign, the plea. Need work. Homeless. These words did not belong in my vocabulary. They did not belong in my world. They certainly did not belong to Arthur. The contrast between Serafina's breezy message and the raw misery in that photograph created a cognitive dissonance so profound. I felt like I was splitting in two. He was on Newbury Street. That was only 10 blocks from my front door. I stared at the stain on my carpet, then at the face on my phone. The ice I felt was no longer just panic. It was something harder, something colder. Something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. I did not bother cleaning the spilled wine. I moved from my living room to my study, my steps precise, my mind suddenly, terribly clear. The fog of disbelief was evaporating, replaced by the cold, familiar hum of analysis. I was no longer a mother. I was an auditor. I sat at my mahogany desk, the one I had commanded for 30 years, and woke my terminal. My fingers flew across the keyboard, muscle memory taking over. I bypassed my personal accounts and went straight to the joint trust I had established for Arthur and Serafina upon their marriage. 2-factor authentication. Passcode. Biometric scan. The system recognized me. The balance page loaded. My eyes scanned the ledger. The rhythm of the transactions was like a heart monitor beating out a code I finally understood. There it was. My transfer. Dated the 1st of the month, a credit of $15,000. And then, the debits. A charge from 3 days ago. Koi Restaurant, San Francisco, $3,000. A tasting menu for, presumably, 1. A charge from 2 days ago. American Airlines, International, $4,500. A single, first-class ticket. Destination Denpasar, Bali. A charge from yesterday. Balenciaga, online boutique, $8,200. A single transaction. The current balance, $112.48. The account was gutted, wiped clean in less than 72 hours, and every transaction, every charge, was authorized by the secondary cardholder, Serafina. My blood did not boil. It turned to ice. This was not panic spending. This was liquidation. I opened a new browser tab. Social media. Serafina had blocked my primary account months ago. A petty little power move after I questioned a caterer's bill for one of her charity luncheons. But I am not a fool. I am a woman who managed high-risk portfolios. I had a dummy account, one I used to follow market trends and, apparently, my own daughter-in-law. Her profile, of course, was public. She craved an audience. The feed was a monument to narcissism, but I did not have to scroll far. The most recent post was from yesterday. The photo was blindingly bright. Serafina, draped in white linen, was raising a champagne flute on the balcony of a sprawling villa. Beyond her, a private infinity pool melted into the turquoise expanse of the Indian Ocean. Her smile was wide, perfect. a predatory gleam in her eyes that I had mistaken for vivacity. She was wearing a new watch, one I did not recognize, one that cost more than a car. And the caption? The caption was the final nail. Living the life I deserve. A huge thank you to my wonderful, amazing husband, Arthur, for working so hard so I can be spoiled. He is the best. Working so hard. My gaze flicked from the sun-drenched image of Bali to the app still open on my phone. The grainy, grey picture of my son on a Boston sidewalk. Need work. Please help. The two images vibrated in my vision, refusing to occupy the same reality, but they did. This was not a paradox. It was a sequence of events. My son was homeless, begging on the street in a ruined suit, while his wife was drinking champagne in a Balinese villa. She was spending my money he no longer had access to. The phone number disconnected. The timing of the trip. The complete draining of the account. I looked back at the Bali photo, at her solitary champagne flute. There was no one else in the reflection of the glass. The table was set for one. Serafina was on vacation by herself. A cold, terrifying clarity settled over me. This was not an emergency. This was not a misunderstanding or a reckless mistake. This was a plan. She had left him. She had stripped him of everything, left him on the street, and then boarded a plane. The anger began to form then. It was not a hot, screaming rage. It was a cold, quiet, methodical fury. The kind of anger I used to feel in the boardroom just before I dismantled an opponent's entire argument, piece by piece. This was not carelessness. This was a hostile takeover. And she had just made the fatal mistake of underestimating me. I looked down at my hands, resting on the hard wood of the desk. They are not the soft, manicured hands of the other women in my neighborhood. The knuckles are pronounced, the skin slightly weathered. These are the hands that clawed their way up. These are the hands that typed 18 hours a day, day after day. At Viridian Dynamics Capital through the roaring 80s and the turbulent 90s. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I was no longer in my quiet study. I was back on the trading floor. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of men shouting, phones ringing, and the clatter of dot matrix printers. I remembered the smell of stale coffee, sweat, and cheap cigars. I remembered being the only woman in that pit, a shark tank where I had to be twice as fast, twice as smart, and 10 times as tough just to be considered half as good. I remembered the casual misogyny, the crude jokes whispered just loud enough for me to hear, the accidental brushes in the elevator, the sting of seeing my bonus check and knowing, just knowing. It was 30% less than the man sitting next to me, the man whose terrible calls I had personally saved. I endured it all. I learned to smile like a predator, to speak only in a low, unwavering voice, and to make my analyses so sharp, so irrefutable, that they could not ignore me. Then came the day my world shattered. My husband, Richard, a kind man with a weak heart, collapsed on a racquetball court, a massive coronary. He was gone before the ambulance arrived, leaving me with a 5-year-old boy named Arthur and a mountain of respectable middle-class debt. The grief was a luxury I could not afford. The world expected me to fold, to sell the house, to retreat into quiet widowhood. I did the opposite. I went back to Viridian. I fought. That is the only word for it. I became a ghost in my own home, a machine at the office. I worked double shifts, triple shifts. I slept under my desk on a cot I hid in a supply closet, living on adrenaline and the stale donuts from the break room. I missed school plays. I missed parent-teacher conferences. I missed the sound of Arthur losing his first tooth. I have photographs of those years, but I am not in them. Every sacrifice, every brutal 14-hour day, every high-stakes trade that made my stomach clench, every juicy contract I tore from the hands of my condescending male colleagues, it was all for one single, shining purpose. Arthur. My son would never know the fear I felt. He would never know the humiliation of being patronized, of being poor, of being desperate. He would never have to fight for his place at the table. I would build the table for him. I would build an empire, even a small one, just so he could stand on my shoulders and touch the sky. And I did. I succeeded beyond what anyone, including myself, thought possible. I was good at it. I was ruthless. I saw patterns where others saw chaos. I turned the meager life insurance policy Richard left behind, pennies on the dollar, into a fortress of investments. I built a multi-million-dollar fortune from the ashes of my old life. I retired early, the day I turned 55. Not because I was tired, though I was, and not to sail around the world or buy a villa in Tuscany, as my colleagues did. I retired to finally be a mother. I retired to make up for all the lost time, all the missed bedtime stories and scraped knees I was not there to kiss. I wanted to give Arthur the one thing my money had not been able to buy my time. But now, staring at the screen, at the picture of my son on the street and my daughter-in-law in paradise, a sickening realization settled in. Perhaps I had done my job too well. In building a fortress to protect him from every possible hardship, I had created a gilded cage. I had shielded him so completely from the cold realities of the world, from the value of $1 earned through sweat and humiliation, that he had no armor. He did not know how to fight. He did not even know a fight was necessary. I had raised a brilliant, kind, and gentle man, and I had left him utterly defenseless against a woman who was just like me. I remember the day Arthur brought her home. It was about 2 years ago, for a Sunday dinner. He had been nervous, practically vibrating with an anxious energy I had not seen since his Harvard admissions interview. "Mum, she is perfect." He had gushed on the phone, his voice cracking. "Just, please, be nice." Then she walked in, and I understood his nervousness. Serafina, she was, in a word, perfect. She was tall and impossibly slender, with pale blonde hair pulled back into a chignon so tight it must have hurt. She wore a simple, cream-coloured linen dress that I knew, from a single glance at the tailoring, cost more than my first car. And that smile, it was a brilliant, blindingly white, porcelain smile that never, not once, reached her eyes. She came from a name, one of those old-line New England families that had a street named after them in Beacon Hill and a wing at the Museum of Fine Arts. I also knew. From a simple background check, I had run a force of habit from my Viridian days that the family name was all they had left. The ancestral trust fund had run dry 2 generations ago. They were bankrupt in everything but reputation. She glided into my home, all practiced grace and airy compliments about my art collection. "Oh, a Rothko," she breathed, barely glancing at it. "How?" "Bold." Arthur trailed behind her like a proud, beaming puppy, utterly enchanted. He was not just in love with her. He was intoxicated by her beauty. Yes, but more than that, by her pedigree. He, who had never wanted for anything, saw her as the one thing my money could not buy him entry into a social stratum that looked down on people like me, people who had actually worked for a living. We sat for dinner. I, perhaps foolishly, tried to connect. I tried to bridge the gap. I talked about my early days, about the grit and the fight required to build what we had. I told a story about my first major deal at Viridian, how I outsmarted a rival firm by working through a weekend blizzard, sleeping on the office floor for 2 nights straight. I told it with a certain pride. I wanted her to know who I was, what this family was built on. When I finished, Serafina tilted her head, that porcelain smile fixed firmly in place. "My goodness. Eleanor," she said, her voice a soft, cultured drawl that could cut glass. I so admire people who had to work that hard." There it was. It was not a compliment. It was a judgment. A silken, dismissive barb that cleanly separated her world from mine. The world of people who simply are from the world of people who have to do, in her eyes. I was not a pioneer. I was a labourer. I was the rough, uncouth, new money who had built the house, while she was the elegant, old money who rightfully deserved to live in it. The fact that her old money was a hollow facade did not matter in the slightest. The performance was everything. I looked at Arthur, expecting him to see the slight, to feel the chill I felt. He saw nothing. He was just gazing at her, his eyes full of a blind, stupid adoration. He reached across the new money table and squeezed her old money hand. "My mom is one of a kind," he said, but it sounded almost like an apology. Later that week, I tried. God help me. I tried. I tried to warn him. I did it gently, cautiously. We were having lunch at his favourite spot, just the two of us. "Arthur," I said, stirring my tea. "She is a lovely girl. Beautiful. But are you sure she loves you? Or is she in love with the life you can give her?" His face darkened. The easy, open expression he had always shared with me vanished, replaced by a defensive, cold mask I had never seen before. "What is that supposed to mean?" he asked, his voice flat. "It means," I said, choosing my words as carefully as I would a high-risk stock, "that she seems very aware of what you represent, of this family's position." He threw his napkin on the table. The clatter of his fork made the table next to us look over. "I cannot believe you," he hissed, his voice low but furious. "I finally find someone who makes me happy, someone truly amazing, and you have to attack her. You have to try and tear her down." "I am not attacking her, Arthur. I am just asking you to be careful." "No," he snapped, standing up. "You are just jealous. You are jealous that I have finally found my own happiness, and you are afraid you will not be the center of my life anymore." It was a slap in the face, a more brutal, more painful blow than any insult I had ever weathered on the trading floor. Jealous. After everything I had done, every sacrifice I had made to ensure his happiness, the accusation was so wrong, so deeply, spectacularly unfair. It stole my breath. That was the first time my son had ever spoken to me with genuine contempt. It was the first time I realized that the boy I had protected from the world had become a man I did not entirely know. And it was that wound, that raw, aching hurt of his accusation, that would make me do something incredibly, monumentally foolish. Arthur's words had wounded me more than any market crash. Jealous. The word echoed for weeks. It was a poison. I, who had built my life on logic and data, was now being driven by a raw, emotional need to prove him wrong. I had to prove that I was not a jealous monster trying to hoard his affection. I was his mother, and I wanted his happiness. So, when they announced their engagement, I did something foolish. I overcompensated. I decided to build a bridge back to my son, and I decided to build it out of money. Upon their wedding, I had my lawyers draw up the papers. I established the Vance Family Trust. The terms were, I thought, generous but firm. I would deposit $15,000 into the account on the first of every month. In my mind, it was a perfectly calculated sum. It was enough to cover the mortgage on their Beacon Hill condo and all their utilities, to ensure they ate well and lived in comfort. But it was not enough for the kind of extravagant, work-free life Serafina's ancestors had supposedly enjoyed. It was a safety net, not a hammock. I presented the trust documents to them over dinner at my apartment. Arthur was visibly relieved, seeing it as a sign of my capitulation, my blessing. Serafina, however, was quiet. She reviewed the signature page, her porcelain smile firmly in place. Then she looked up, and her eyes glistened with what I, in my desperate need for her approval, mistook for genuine emotion. A single, perfect tear rolled down her cheek. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice trembling just so. This is incredibly generous. It is just—" "What is it, dear?" I asked, my heart sinking. "It is just that. 15,000. She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "It sounds like so much. I know. But Boston is just so frightfully expensive. And with Arthur's position, we have appearances to maintain." She dabbed her eye. "It will be a struggle." I was floored. A struggle. On 15,000 a month, tax-free, on top of Arthur's not insignificant salary, but before I could formulate a logical rebuttal, she launched the second, more precise, attack. "It is not really about the amount, Mother," she said, using the title for the first time. It sent a pathetic little thrill through me. "It is about partnership. I want to be a wife. I want to manage our finances, to plan our future, so that Arthur can focus all his energy on his brilliant career. He has so much potential, and I do not want him worried about utility bills." She leaned forward, placing her cool, slender hand over mine. "And I want to feel like I am truly part of this family, not just an outsider being given an allowance." She looked at the documents, then at me, her blue eyes wide with manufactured vulnerability. "Having joint access, letting me manage the day-to-day, it would mean everything. It would mean you trust me, that I really, truly belong." My analyst brain was screaming. Red flags were waving on every monitor in my mind. Never cede control. Diversify risk. Protect your assets. But my wounded heart, the heart of a mother who had just been called jealous by her only son, saw a chance. I saw a daughter-in-law asking to be let in. I saw a way to show Arthur that I was not a tyrant, that I trusted his choice, that I loved him. So, I caved. "Of course," I said, my voice betraying none of my internal alarms. "Of course, you should have access. You are his wife." I did add one stipulation, one firewall. It was the only part of me from Viridian that won the argument that day. "There is one condition," I added, trying to sound firm. The trust remains active only as long as Arthur maintains a full-time, salaried position. It does not matter what he does if he wants to teach history or work at a non-profit. That is his choice. But he must work. It is important to have purpose. It was my anchor, my way of keeping my son tethered to the real world, to the value of a day's labour. Serafina's smile returned, brighter this time, if that were possible. She squeezed my hand. "That is a wonderful idea. Mother?" she said, her voice smooth as silk. "It is so important for a man to have his purpose." I see it now. Of course. I see it with the agonizing clarity of hindsight. She was not thanking me. She was not agreeing with me. She was looking at the single failsafe I had built into the system and identifying it as the trigger for her explosive device. I did not just give her the key to the vault. I handed her the weapon, pointed it at my own son, and gave her my blessing to pull the trigger whenever she saw fit. The months following the wedding were quiet. The bridge I thought I was building with the trust fund turned out to be a one-way street, with Serafina standing guard at the gate. My contact with Arthur, once a daily occurrence, slowed to a weekly call, then a bi-weekly text, then almost nothing. I would call, and Serafina would invariably answer, her voice always bright and brittle, like spun glass. "Oh, Eleanor. Hi, Arthur is just buried right now. A huge project at the firm. It is all terribly confidential. You know how it is. He just cannot be disturbed." I did not know how it was. Arthur had never been too busy to talk to his mother. Not once in his life. Then came the trips. I would see the charges on the trust statement, which I still monitored out of sheer, unshakable habit. "We are off to Greece for 2 weeks," Serafina announced in a breezy voicemail left on my landline. "Arthur's company is sending him a huge bonus for landing the Anderson account. Is not he just amazing?" I checked Arthur's company website. I still knew people there. There was no Anderson account. The bonus, I knew, was simply my money, funneled through their joint account and spent as she pleased. But I said nothing. To protest, to even question it, would be to prove Arthur's original, stinging accusation that I was jealous, that I was controlling. So I stayed silent, chewing on the bitter taste of the lie, and sent a postcard to their condo saying, "Hope you are having fun." When September rolled around, I called to make plans for Thanksgiving. It had always been our holiday. Ever since Richard died, it was just the two of us. A quiet, unbreakable tradition of too much food and old movies. Serafina answered on the third ring. "Oh, Thanksgiving," she chirped, as if the concept was entirely novel to her. "That is just so sweet, Eleanor. But we simply cannot. We have to go to my parents' place in Martha's Vineyard. It is tradition." A pause. "We have done it every single year since I was a child. You understand?" I did not understand. Her family, as I knew, had not owned the vineyard house in a decade. But what could I say? I murmured something about having a good time and hung up the phone. I spent that Thanksgiving, for the first time in over 20 years, completely and utterly alone. On the rare occasions I did manage to get Arthur himself on the phone. The calls were strained and painfully brief. He always sounded distant, rushed, as if he was on a timer. "Hi, Mum. I cannot talk long. We are just heading out." His voice was often low, a near whisper, as if he was afraid of being overheard. "Is everything all right, honey?" I would ask, a knot of dread tightening low in my stomach. "Yeah, fine, Mum. Everything is great, just..." Busy. Really busy. Serafina sends her love. Gotta go. And the line would click dead. I was being systematically, politely, and ruthlessly excised from my son's life. Serafina was building a wall around him, a beautiful, socially acceptable wall, and she was using my own money to buy the bricks. I was the outsider, the ATM, the bothersome, uncultured relic of a new money past she was so desperate to erase. The last time I saw him in person was 3 months ago. It was at a dreadful charity gala for the preservation of some historic lighthouse. Serafina had insisted they attend for the social pages, and I was on the board of the foundation, so my presence was mandatory. I spotted him across the ballroom, standing near a towering, melting ice sculpture. Holding a glass of champagne he clearly was not drinking. He looked wrong. He was wearing an impeccably tailored tuxedo, but he seemed to be drowning in it. He was thin, not just slender, but gaunt. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed and anxious, darting around the room as if he was looking for an escape route or an enemy. I made my way through the crush of fake smiles and cloying, expensive perfume. Arthur. He startled, nearly spilling his drink. Oh, hi, Mum. His voice was flat. Arthur, my God, I said, my voice low, for his ears only. Are you ill? You look exhausted. Is work too much? Is everything okay? He opened his mouth to speak, and for a fleeting, agonizing second, I saw the boy I raised. I saw the child who was scared, uncertain, and looking for help. His eyes met mine, and there was a desperate, silent plea in them. But the moment shattered. There you are, darling. Serafina materialized at his elbow, a vision in sapphire silk that must have cost $5,000. She looped her arm through his, possessively, her porcelain smile firmly in place for the crowd. She gave me a polite, dismissive nod. Eleanor. She tugged on his arm, a sharp, proprietary gesture, pulling him closer to her. Is your mother bothering you, sweetie? She asked, her voice light and playful, but loud enough for those around us to hear. I was just asking if he was feeling all right, I said, my own voice turning cold. He looks unwell. Serafina let out a high, tinkling laugh, the one I now recognized from her voicemail, the one that meant she was lying. She patted Arthur's chest, a gesture that looked affectionate, but was really a warning, a physical claim of ownership. Oh, he is just tired from working so hard to spoil little old me, she announced to the room at large. He never stops. He is always taking care of me. Are not you? Darling? Arthur just stared into his champagne glass, his expression completely, terrifyingly blank. He did not look at her. He did not look at me. He just deflated. At the time, I brushed off the comment as another one of her grating, narcissistic jokes. I was hurt by Arthur's silence, but I chalked it up to the pressure of the evening and his wife's suffocating presence. Now, sitting in my study, the image of Arthur on the pavement burning in my mind. I replayed that moment, her high, false laugh, the possessive grip on his arm, his hollow-eyed, silent submission. I realized with a jolt that chilled me to the bone. It was not a joke. It was not a boast. It was a confession. He was working to spoil her, and it was draining the very life out of him. And that was 3 months ago. 3 months before his phone was disconnected. 3 months before he ended up on a Boston sidewalk with a cardboard sign. The man at the gala was on the edge of a cliff. The man in the photograph had already been pushed off. I am not a woman who sits and weeps. Tears are a liability, a non-performing asset. They cloud judgment, and in that moment, I needed absolute, diamond-hard clarity. My son was on the street. My daughter-in-law was in Bali. I had the what. I needed the how and the why. I was an analyst, and I needed data. I picked up my secure line, the one I kept from my Viridian days. I did not call Arthur's disconnected number. I did not call Seraphina's breezy voicemail. I accessed a different part of my contacts, a name I had not used since I vetted a potential merger partner back in 2008. The phone rang exactly once. Kessler. His voice was gravel, impatient. "Mr. Kessler," I said, my own voice perfectly flat. "This is Eleanor Vance." There was a half-second of silence. "Well, that is a name from the past. I thought you were retired, enjoying the good life on some beach." "I am not," I said, cutting through the pleasantries. "I need your services. I want everything on a Seraphina Vance, wife of Arthur Vance, and I want the current status, location, and condition of my son, Arthur. I am not interested in discretion. I am interested in speed. I want to know every dollar she has spent, everyone she has spoken to, and everything she has done for the past 6 months. And I want to know why my son is homeless." "That is a lot of everything, Mrs. Vance. It will be expensive. I am authorizing a $50,000 retainer. I expect the first report by close of business tomorrow." "You will have it," he said, and the line went dead. Money cannot buy love, and it cannot buy happiness, but it can buy velocity. It can buy the truth, packaged and delivered in a secure digital file. I did not sleep. I sat in my study, the glow of the monitors illuminating the dark room. I drank black coffee and watched the stock tickers for the Asian markets, not because I cared about the indices, but because they were a familiar, logical rhythm in a world that had suddenly, violently, stopped making sense. The email arrived 48 hours later, not 24. Kessler, despite his price tag, was thorough. The subject line was blank. The attachment was a single, password-protected PDF. The password, as per our old arrangement, was the ticker symbol of the last stock I had ever shorted. I opened the file. It was not a narrative. It was a timeline. It was a clinical, emotionless execution of the facts, exactly as I had requested. The first page confirmed what I already knew. Seraphina Vance was checked into a 3-bedroom private villa at a luxury resort in Bali. Booked for 1. Confirmed. Arthur Vance was classified as current accommodation unsecured, transient. He had been sighted for the past 4 nights on the same block of Newbury Street. Confirmed. But it was the timeline of the preceding 2 months that made the air leave my lungs. Item: Arthur Vance. Employment status terminated. Employer Bain Capital. Date of termination: 2 months ago. Reason for termination: non-attendance. My blood ran cold. He had been fired 2 months ago. He had breached the one simple, non-negotiable clause I had put in the trust. Item: Kessler's report included surveillance notes from a source within Seraphina's social circle. Subject Seraphina was heard boasting at a luncheon at the Chiltern Club that she had finally convinced Arthur he was too good for his boring 9 to 5, that his true passion was what mattered, and he should just quit to find himself. She had not just supported him, she had convinced him to quit. She had engineered the very breach of contract that I had so stupidly put in place. Item financial analysis. The moment Arthur's final paycheck was deposited, the online banking passwords for the joint trust account were changed. The associated email address was switched from Arthur's Harvard address to a new, encrypted email address. Serafina had used a legal loophole in the trust's joint access agreement, one my own lawyers had drafted to imply marital unity, to seize sole executive control of the account the instant the full-time employment clause was broken. She had locked him out. Item text message intercepts. A final exchange between Arthur and Serafina, dated 2 days before her flight to Bali. Arthur. Sarah, I cannot log in. The bank site says my password is wrong. Did you change something? We need to pay the condo fee. Serafina. It is not me, darling. It must be your mother. Arthur. What? Why would she do that? I was going to tell her about the job. I just needed time. Serafina. She must have found out. She called me, screaming. She said the deal was broken. She said she was cutting us off. Arthur. Both of us. She said we were on our own. The report ended there. I stared at the last lines, reading them over and over. She called me, screaming. She is cutting us off. She said we were on our own. A lie. A devastating, brilliant, and utterly toxic lie. I had not spoken to Serafina in weeks. I had not known he lost his job. I had not cut him off. She had. This was the true weapon. This was the master stroke. She did not just take his money and his home. She did not just abandon him. She made him believe I had abandoned him. I scrolled past the text intercepts, past the bank statements, past the travel itineraries. The financial betrayal was grotesque, a surgical theft I could understand on an intellectual level. The manipulation was vicious, but none of it prepared me for the last item in the file. It was not a document. It was an embedded audio player. File AS Final Call MP3. Kessler's note was brief. Audio recovered from a cloud backup associated with subject's Arthur known devices, acquired via pre-existing security vulnerabilities. This is the last recorded communication between Arthur Vance and Serafina Vance before her departure. My hand was shaking. I clicked the play icon. The audio was clear. There was the faint sound of traffic, as if Arthur was on the street. Arthur's voice. It was thin, frayed, cracking with a panic I had not heard since he was a small child, lost in a department store. I don't understand. Sarah, I don't understand. Why would she do this? Why we paid the mortgage? What did we do? A pause. Then Serafina's voice. It was no longer the sugary, high-pitched chirp she used in public. This voice was flat, bored, and cold as sheet metal. I told you what she said. Arthur. But it doesn't make any sense, he cried, his voice breaking. She would. She would talk to me first. She would not just cut me off. The bank said the account is frozen. My key fob does not even work at the condo anymore. How are we going to live? Sarah. What are we supposed to do? I don't know. Arthur. She sighed, a sound of profound, theatrical impatience. Maybe your mother finally woke up and realized what a complete and utter failure you are. You cannot even hold down a simple job to keep your wife comfortable. It is pathetic. That is not true, he said. But it was a wail, not a denial. It was. We decided, I'll call her. I'll call her right now. I'll explain. She'll fix this. She just misunderstands. Then, the final blow. Serafina let out a small, cruel laugh. It was not a sound of humor. It was a sound of dismissal, of pure, unadulterated contempt. Do not bother. I already spoke to her. What, when? This morning, I tried to beg for you. Arthur. I really did. And do you know what she said? What? He whispered. She said she is done. She said she has wasted enough of her life and her money on you. She said. And here. Seraphina's voice was almost a purr. She said she wishes she had never had you. The audio file ended, but I could still hear it. That last sentence, that final, impossible, soul-destroying lie, hung in the silence of my study. She wishes she had never had you. I almost blacked out. The room tilted, the blood rushing from my head, leaving a cold, roaring void. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles white, the grain of the wood biting into my palms. I never said that. I would never say that. Not in my blackest, angriest, most disappointed moment I would never, and in that instant. I understood. I understood everything. The disconnected phone, the silence, the fact that he was on a street 10 blocks from my home and had not come to me. He did not just think he was poor. He did not just think he was locked out of his home. He believed he was an orphan. He believed the only person left in his life, his own mother, had not just disowned him, but had erased his very existence. She had built a wall of lies, and he was trapped behind it, starving and alone. Seraphina had not just taken my money. That was incidental. She had taken my son's career. She had taken his home. And then, with a final, surgical twist of the knife, she had taken his last and only refuge. She had taken his mother. She had taken me from him. I looked at the image of Arthur on my screen, the Harvard grad sign. It was not a plea for a job. It was the last, desperate cry of a man who believed he had absolutely nothing, and no one, left in the world. She had not just left him homeless. She had left him hopeless. The anger I felt before was nothing. It was a flickering candle compared to the inferno that now consumed me. The ice in my veins was no longer just cold. It was burning. I did not cry. The audio file ended, and I simply sat back in my chair. The grief was still there, a cold, heavy stone in my gut, but the rage had crystallized it. It was no longer a debilitating emotion. It was fuel. It was the high-octane, cold fusion anger that had driven me through 30 years on the trading floor. I was no longer a grieving mother. I was an executioner. My fingers moved to the secure line again. I did not call Kessler. I called my chief counsel, Jonathan Harrison, the senior partner at Kincaid, Croft and Lowell. He was a man who had structured my trusts, protected my assets, and guarded my secrets for 2 decades. It was 3 o'clock in the morning in Boston. I did not care. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep but instantly alert. Eleanor. Jonathan, I said. My voice was low, perfectly even. I am activating the in extremis clause in the Vance Family Trust. Article 4, Section B. I want it done immediately. There was a pause. I could hear him sitting up, the rustle of sheets. Eleanor, what are you talking about? That is a force majeure provision. It is an atomic option. It requires irrefutable proof of... My God. The standard is gross financial malfeasance and direct, intentional infliction of emotional harm against a primary beneficiary. I am aware of what it requires. I said. I opened my email. I dragged Kessler's entire, unredacted PDF report. I attached it. Check your inbox. You will find a 48-hour investigative report from Kessler. Kessler. Harrison's voice was sharp now, all sleepiness gone. You brought in Kessler? What in God's name is going on? Read the report, read the financial breakdown, read the text intercepts. And then, I said, play the final audio file. I waited. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. I did not time it. But it must have been 10, maybe 15 minutes. I just stared at the blank monitor, listening to the sound of another man's breathing as he processed the destruction of my family. Finally, there was a sharp intake of breath, followed by a low, shaky, "Good Lord." "Indeed," I said. "Is that irrefutable enough for you?" "Jonathan? I have never seen anything like this," he whispered. It is sociopathic." "Activate the clause," I commanded. My voice was the one I used to use at Viridian, the one that meant, do not argue, just execute. "Of course," he said, and I could hear him typing furiously. "The moment the markets open, I will file the emergency injunction. We will have a judge's order within the hour. What are your instructions?" "Total annihilation," I said. "I want every joint account associated with that trust frozen. I want every credit card issued under Serafina Vance's name, primary or secondary, deactivated. I want every single pending transaction, every wire transfer, every automated payment, blocked and bounced. By the time the sun rises in Bali, she is to be financially radioactive." "Understood," Harrison said. "We will sever her access completely. And what about Arthur? The clause will freeze him out as well. He is a party to the trust." "No," I said. The word was sharp. "He is the victim. You will immediately establish a new, private, non-trust account. Sole signatory Arthur Vance. You will fund it with $500,000 from my personal reserve account, the one Serafina does not know exists. 500,000. Got it. And the access credentials." "You will generate them," I said, "but you will not activate them. You will not send them to him. You will send them to me. Am I clear?" "Perfectly. Eleanor?" he said, his voice now as cold and professional as mine. "Consider it done." I hung up the phone. I did not feel relief. I did not feel satisfaction. I felt a cold, hard sense of procedure. I was a surgeon who had just prepped the operating room. The disease had been identified. The instruments were sterilized. The plan of action was set. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window of my study. I looked out over the sleeping city, the lights of the Hancock Tower reflecting in the dark waters of the Charles. Somewhere out there, 10 blocks away, my son was cold, hungry, and believed he was completely alone in the world. Halfway across the globe, a monster was sleeping soundly in a luxury villa, dreaming of her new Balenciaga purchases, funded by my life's work. "First," I whispered to the glass, my breath fogging it slightly, "I am going to get my son." I turned away from the window, grabbing my coat. "And second, I am going to send my daughter-in-law a message. 8,000 miles away, the air in the Ngurah Rai International Airport terminal was thick with humidity, clove cigarettes, and the low hum of anxiety. Serafina Vance, annoyed and overheated, tapped her foot at the first-class check-in counter. Before her stood a monument to her greed, 10 matching, oversized, designer suitcases, all of them flagged for being severely overweight. The check-in attendant, A patient man offered her a strained smile. "Ma'am, the total for the excess and overweight baggage. It is a very significant charge." Serafina let out an impatient sigh, loud enough for the people behind her to hear. "Yes. Fine. Whatever it is," she said, waving her hand dismissively, as if the concept of money was a mild irritation. "Just charge it." She produced her wallet and, with a flourish, slid the American Express Centurion card across the counter. The black card. Her ultimate key to the world. The one that proved she belonged. "On that." The attendant took it, swiped it through the reader. He frowned. He looked at his screen, then at the card, then back at the screen. He swiped it again. Slower this time. The terminal beeped. A flat, negative sound. "I am very sorry, ma'am," he said, pushing the card back toward her. "This card has been declined." Serafina's head snapped back. "What, that is impossible?" She scoffed. "Your machine is old. It must be broken. Try it again." "I have tried it twice, ma'am," the attendant said, his voice remaining polite but firm. "The transaction is rejected by the bank." "Unbelievable," Serafina hissed, her face flushing a dull red. The air of bored superiority was evaporating, replaced by a sharp-edged annoyance. She snatched the card and dug back into her wallet, pulling out a platinum visa. "Fine. Use this one, and please be quick about it." He swiped the visa. The result was instantaneous. "Declined, ma'am." "What is wrong with you?" she said, her voice rising to a near shriek. She threw her last card, a MasterCard, onto the counter. "Try. This. One." He did not even swipe it. He inserted the chip. The terminal beeped angrily, immediately. "Declined, ma'am." A cold sweat began to prickle on her forehead. The practiced porcelain smile was gone, replaced by a mask of raw panic. "No, no. You check again. Check your system. My accounts have hundreds of thousands of dollars in them. This is ridiculous." She grabbed her phone, her thumb shaking as she tried to open her mobile banking app, the one that gave her direct access to my money. The loading icon spun and spun. Then, a red banner appeared at the top. "Server error authentication failed. Please contact your account administrator." "What? No," she whispered, stabbing the refresh button, again and again, each tap more frantic than the last. And just as she was about to throw the phone, a new notification dropped down from the top of the screen. An email. The sender was a name she did not recognize: Kincaid, Croft, and Lowell. The subject line was in all capital letters, stark and terrifying. Urgent immediate asset, freeze and fraud investigation, Vance Family Trust. Her heart stopped. Her fingers, numb and clumsy, tapped the banner. The email opened. It was short, precise, and absolutely brutal. "Dear Ms. Serafina Vance, pursuant to Article 4, Section B of the Vance Family Trust Agreement, and due to irrefutable evidence of gross financial malfeasance, bad faith violations of contract, and the intentional infliction of emotional and financial harm against the primary beneficiary, all your financial access, privileges, and accounts associated with this trust have been terminated permanently, effective immediately. All associated credit lines have been cancelled. All pending transactions have been rejected. Any further attempt to access or withdraw funds will be reported to international authorities as felony theft." She stared at the words, felony theft, as if on cue. The screen flickered. A large red battery icon flashed in the center. Her phone, which she had not bothered to charge while packing her spoils, died. The screen went black, plunging her into a sudden, horrifying, digital silence. She stood there, 8,000 miles from a home she could no longer enter. She had no money, no credit, no bank, no phone. She was just a woman, alone, with 10 suitcases of stolen goods she could not pay for. The line behind her, no longer polite, began to stir. A man grumbled. "Are you going to be all day? Some of us have planes to catch." Serafina looked up, her eyes wide and blank, searching for an escape. She looked at the airline attendant. His patience was gone. His face was an impassive mask. He had a job to do, and she was no longer a first-class passenger. She was just a problem. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat and devoid of all service industry warmth. "Are you going to pay for these bags or not? Thank you so much for listening to my story today. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to connect and hear your thoughts on this. If you want to hear what happens next, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary and like this video. And if you really want to support the channel, please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.